everyone. Welcome to Echo. My name is Ryan Becker. I'm the host of Echo, and I'm really glad you're here and you're experiencing this podcast and everything that we are talking about. And I hope that today's episode is a blessing to you. I have the privilege of introducing you to two friends of mine. The first is Marty Miller. Marty Miller runs a really huge men's ministry, both for his local church and for the Georgia Cumberland Conference. He is someone who's passionate about leading men into a deeper relationship with Christ and helping them discover real and honest masculinity and what that looks like. And then the next is Austin Bates. Austin Bates is a student at Southern, theology major currently, and good friend of mine as well. And I'm excited for you to hear from both of them and their perspectives and their opinions on what we're talking about today. So I won't keep you from that awesome content any further. Welcome to Echo. Let's get started.
This episode of the Echo Podcast is sponsored by Southern Adventist University.
So a few years ago, I had the privilege of sitting in a Pentecostal service on a Friday night. A friend of mine had invited me. Ironically, the friend did not identify as Pentecostal in any way, shape, or form. And there was some Pentecostal evangelist that was there, a missionary, and I experienced like the strangest thing ever that I've ever experienced. For them, it was, I guess, normal. But he talked about this miraculous healing that he had experienced, or that he had been a part of in South America, I believe. And then at the end, we did prayer time. And I'm used to, growing up as an Adventist prayer time, where it might be a little long, but long isn't, long as not more than usually 3 minutes, if that. Like that's a long prayer. Like that's someone like is really going, and someone's probably fallen asleep by the end of those 3 minutes, right? So we all rise to our feet and we're praying, and then I realized that, oh right, I'm in a different environment here. That prayer went for 30 minutes, and in that time, the evangelist / missionary called several people up in order to give them the gift of tongues, which is something that is very common in Pentecostals, in Pentecostalism. I think that's the word I'm looking for. But yes, in that denomination. To me, I just stood there, eyes closed, for 30 minutes, going, what is happening? And I think one of the reason I share that story, and I'm not making fun of Pentecostals in any way, was what I'm really doing is making fun of myself for how uncomfortable I felt in that moment. And one of the things that I realized is just how different prayer is for every single individual. And just as I would say there's as many worldviews as there are people in the world, there's as many different ways to pray as there are believers in the world. And that's across any religion. And so I want to talk about prayer life today because I know that everyone has a different form of it, maybe doesn't have one at all and wants to start one. And so I want to talk about our experiences and share a little bit from our lives as to what that kind of has looked like over the years, and whether that's good, bad, everything in between, right? I think the benefit of this kind of format and what we're doing is we get to have an honest conversation. And so there's no judgment at this table. I can't speak for someone sitting in a car or doing chores while they do this, but it's likely that you'll never hear them anyway. So yeah, I guess a good place to start would be, what was prayer to you as a child, or kind of in your early expression of your faith in Adventism? And Austin, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I relate to what you were saying about the longest prayer being about 3 minutes or so. Growing up,
yeah,
I remember Sabbath mornings whenever my dad would be at one church preaching before my family left for the other church. My mom would pray for worship, and I remember sitting there and just hearing the clock tick while she was praying. It's like, oh, this is going to take forever, and just sitting there agonizing over the length. But one thing that was instilled in me from a very early age was that prayer is a conversation with a friend. So while my prayers were short, like 30 seconds, as a kid, I always knew that God was somebody there that I could just have a conversation with, like I would just a normal person. So my prayers were very, very eclectic, very odd, but just along the lines of, God so-and-so was mean to me. And, that sucks.
Yeah.
But that was about it. And so it kind of helped me get the mindset of prayer isn't this, you have to be on your knees for this certain amount of time before it's counted as a righteous prayer, but that you can just say whatever to God and he can take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Marty, what about you?
Well, I would say that, I've got a long history. I've been around a long time, but as I think back to my early years, it was always something that was done around, there was a time for prayer, when we eat. You go to church, there was prayer at a certain time. You had family worship, there was a certain time for that. So, I would say that my experience, because I'm from a different generation, probably was a little bit different than that. I think that it was a lot more, this is the time you pray, and a little bit more formal, even though I had a really loving family and we did pray. Yeah. But just a little bit more of that flavor.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, and that there was a little bit of a mix of that in my own life. Growing up, my grandmother was the one who spent most of the time with me because both of my parents worked full time. So my grandma would pick me up every day, and she's the one who would do worship with me. She's the one who would pray with me a lot. My parents would get home late and would be tired, and they'd be in their room, and we'd all be settled in for the night. And that's not like speaking ill of my parents or anything. Like that's just my childhood. And turns out that when you have 3 kids, you need money too, and so there's, for me, there was a little bit of that structure and more formalism. My grandmother is Hispanic, born and raised in Cuba. And if you know anything about any Spanish Christians, like not all, but there tends to be more of an emphasis on formal liturgy and structure, which can be a great thing. And so for me, it was kind of a mix of both. At home, it was that, but then at school, I was getting more of, Austin, what you shared of the conversationalist aspect of it. And so what ended up happening is this weird amalgamation of like, I'll formally acknowledge God, but then I will have casual conversation instead of "Hey God" or "Hi God." It'll be "Father in heaven, thank you for this," and then launch into casual conversations. This weird kind of mix between the
almost
two.
like a double life.
Yeah, right. But in the same prayer. But that's significant. So, what were some of the positive things that you've experienced with prayer? And then on the flip, I'm going to ask the flip side of that after. But what were some of the positive things that you've encountered in your own prayer life? And Marty, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I think that a couple of things. Number one, I've learned to not say, like if I'm having a conversation, I find out there's a need. Don't say, "Hey, I'll pray for you," and then walk off. I've learned that is the golden moment to say, "Hey, do you mind if I pray with you right now?" And that's the most meaningful thing you can do, and it really makes the experience so tangible, so real. It's like you're pulling God into that situation at that moment. Another thing that I've really come to realize lately, hate to say it, but it's probably just in the last year, and that is how to pray with my wife. And, we pray for one another, and I think that that's good, but to pray for somebody in their presence. And I've come up with a prayer that I use the hand with. And do you mind if I just share this? Because I think this is a tremendous tool, because most men don't know how to pray with their wife, for their wife. And so the hand is a great teaching tool. I spent quite a bit of time in team building and stuff like that with outdoor leadership. So the hand is a metaphor for group dynamics. So you've got the thumbs up, encouragement. You got the finger of direction, correction sometimes. You've got the zinger finger. We want to keep that down with the thumb of encouragement. We've got the ring finger, which is commitment to the group. And then the final one is the pinky, and that is, somebody's going to have a struggle with what we're doing here, and we come together, and we get strength from that. So in my prayer with my wife, what I've done is actually, with my arm around her, kneeling, to just go through those fingers one at a time speaking the affirmation to my wife, thanking God for her, and telling her how God sees her. And then I move on to the finger of direction and saying, I know that, God, you're going to be telling her something today, some guidance, and maybe I'm going to give some guidance to her, some ideas. May she be receptive. And then also the negative voices in our head, may she take those thoughts captive. And may she have the power to overcome and to come back to that knowledge. And then know that you're not going to leave her or forsake her. I'm not going to. We're committed to one another. And whatever struggle she's going through with today, through it, she's going to get stronger because she trusts in God, and that together we're going to be stronger. So that was a kind of a quick overview, but those are two things that I have just been totally excited about in my prayer life. Yeah. And I know that that's more out there, but it's pulling people in here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
No, thank you for sharing both of those, and that's awesome. Something that I'm going to pocket for when I'm married, but it's something that I can practice in the relationship I'm in now. So
absolutely,
no, that's great.
It's a winner.
That's right.
I promise you.
Yeah, and it's something you can do for friends and other men and other women.
Totally.
That is a easily replicatable model.
Yeah, and you got your hand with you all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So Austin, what about you? What are some positive things that you've experienced in your prayer life?
Yeah, I think for most of my life, growing up as an Adventist and just being saturated, it was often hard to see God working personally in my life. And so I approached fixing that from a tactic of just basically like trying to convince God why he should show himself to me. And I realized that wasn't working. You can't coerce God.
Turns out that doesn't end well.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I think there are a few Bible characters that tried that.
A couple.
But once I stopped trying and I stopped trying to convince him, then I started seeing him in tangible ways. So when I stopped asking him, like, God, would you please just show yourself to me? And I approached it more from just let me see your will and let me do your will. Then people started coming into my life and saying things and doing things that I needed to hear and see in order to see God's character in a more tangible way. So I stopped asking for God to reveal himself to me and instead started asking how I could reveal him to others. Another thing that I've used a little bit more in the past, but also some recently, is journaling my prayers. It's interesting. I was just looking back at one from like 2017, and it's really cool to go back to previous years and see how God has worked. And not just that, but to see like whatever I was dealing with and how I was just pouring it out. And then to look at my life now and see the difference, and see the ways that only God was able to change whatever I was dealing with, and just having that record and being able to see that difference is really helpful.
I think there's a quote. I'm going to butcher it, but I'm hoping that it'll be the substance of it will get across. There's a quote that whenever things are bad, remember there was a time that you were praying for where you are now, or for the things you have now, or you were hoping that you would be where you are now. And that is something that just get kind of, like, prayer journaling is a great way to see and remind yourself of what that time was. And it's not necessarily to dismiss everything that might be bad that's happening, but rather to just kind of reorient your perspective around it. But on that note of prayer journaling, one of the things that I did this when I was pastoring full time. One of my churches did prayer meeting every Wednesday night. Surprise, that's a shocker to all Adventists everywhere. But one of the activities I took them through, and we did this for a few months, and then we kind of changed the format of prayer meeting after this, was I bought 3 jars. It was 2, I think I went to Target and did this. I bought 2 jars of decorative stones. One had small stones, one had bigger stones. And then I bought a 3rd empty glass jar. And the idea was that as we shared prayer requests, or as we were praying, as people were sharing praises, I would invite them to, or answered prayer requests, I would invite them to, if their praise was a result of God's intervention in a situation or what was answered, I let every single individual person decide for themselves interpret whether it was a big thing or a small thing. So the group never decided it for them, because what is big to me might not be big to you, or what's small to me might be huge to you. And so they would be able to reach in, grab a stone, and drop it in the empty one. And over time, as the weeks went by, you start to see that jar filling up as a visual reminder of all of the different ways that God had answered prayers and was working in the lives of other church members. And it's something that I haven't always done in my own personal life. It's something I actually want to do again. It's just to watch that jar fill up over time, and see some sort of visual reference and reminder of how God has been faithful to me, through my prayer life and through just my life in general. So I want to flip now and ask kind of the negatives. What are some, and maybe you haven't experienced anything negative with your prayer life, which ideal, right? And if that's the case, then what are some negative things you had to unlearn about prayer? So you had one already, and I'm curious to know if there's any others. But what are some negative things that you either had to unlearn, or what were some negative things that were either taught or instilled in you about prayer and what it is and what its purpose is? Marty, let's start with you.
Well, I think one of the big things about prayer is that it's most of the time perceived as asking. Okay, God, I need this, I need that. And if you really think about the word prayer, it kind of matches with praise a lot more than ask. So I think that really, for me to just think about prayer in that context is really helpful, because I don't know, just that whole idea of just having a relationship with somebody that's always asking for something. If you've ever been in one of those kind of relationships, not exactly too good. So I've appreciated that little switch in the way I think about prayer. But one of the things that's always been challenging for me, and I think this is true with us guys, is we're not quick to pray. And my wife, she's quick to pray. And she will many times say, when I'm trying to make a decision on something, she will say the one question that always gets me, and I go, have you prayed about that? And it's rare that when she says that I actually go, yeah, I've prayed about it for the last 3 days. So anyway, that's kind of a negative about myself, and I think it's true with most of us guys.
Happens to be on a weekly basis.
Daily. So that's still a learning curve for me, and I don't know that I'll ever get to the point where I'm quick to pray. I know that that's my desire, but my head just gets in there, and I try to figure things out. And instead of being my last resort, it should be my first.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Austin, what about you?
I think most of my struggles with prayer have come down to a wrong view of the character of God in my head, as an exacting overlord, basically. Along with the traditional Adventist view, my entire life comes, I think, for a lot of people, the perception that prayer and Bible study is something that you have to do to be saved. And so it was good growing up for me to have that mentality of it's a conversation, but yet it also scared me, because if I'm not having these 30-minute prayers, am I actually saved? So that mentality was something that I had to overcome over years, the length of my entire long life.
All 18 years.
All 18. But it did take me a while to overcome, and just realizing the loving relational character of God, and that it's not something we have to do, and it's not even something that we have to want to do. But it's just, he loves us that much that he desires that. And once we see that, then that desire becomes instilled in us. But it's not something that we have to cultivate in a, back-breaking, sweaty way of forcing that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I think two things for me. One was instilled in me not because someone literally instilled it and told me this is the way it is, but rather it's a normal behavior that praying people do, that I saw applied in weird ways, and it made me mad a little bit. And it was praying before meals, and the reason it made me mad was not because I don't like that people are praying for their meals, but rather it's kind of the same thing of when someone who wants to lose weight goes to McDonald's and orders a Big Mac and a large fry and then gets a diet drink because, they want to lose weight. For prayer, I saw a lot of people praying over meals that were clearly not like healthy in any way, shape, or form. And it just seemed presumptuous to assume, well, God's going to just make that like, I just pray that this food will nourish and strengthen my body as I
the shade, right?
Yeah, no, but like that's a thing that I saw, and it bothered me. It felt like I had a friend who at one point in his faith journey was praying over, and I kid you not, every single chip in a bag of chips, like as he would pray, and that was his journey. Like I mean, I guess there's a little judgment there because that's not something I would do, but that's just where he was in his faith. And, but like, that was something that just seemed off to me, and it seemed, out of balance. And so instead of basically what I did was I would acknowledge that what I'm about to eat is not necessarily the most ideal, because everyone can have a snack or whatever, or live solely off of Taco Bell. But I learned to just thank God for the food, thank God for the opportunity, for providing and for giving me options and praying a different way. But the second thing too, and this has been over the last several years that I've been trying to apply this and really instill this in myself. Instead of, I had to learn to unsee or unview prayer as asking God to do my will, right? And as you said, it's not just asking God things, but rather I've started to see prayer as aligning myself with God's will. And that's not the same as saying, God, if this is your will, do it if it's your will. That's not what I'm saying. But rather, if I'm asking God, what do you want me to do here? Or God, is this the right decision? What I'm trying to do is align my heart with God so that as I walk, I can walk confidently knowing I'm in step with the Spirit. And that to me changed the entire way that I pray. Because now it meant it was a check as well. Prayer was an opportunity, not necessarily for me to get guidance, but or for God to perform some miracle, but rather prayer was now a way for me to stop, slow down, breathe, and really think through what I was doing and talk it out like a conversation, talk it out with God and say, where am I here? Where's my heart here? What do I need to do about this? And that changed pretty much everything for me. It's been really, really impactful for me over the course of, I would say, the last 5 years that I've been applying it. So yeah, that's huge.
I think one other thing that kind of relates to that is there's a quote by Jim Elliot, and I'm going to butcher it obviously because I don't have it memorized, but it's something along the lines of the long relationship building prayers that we have. The small in the moment prayers that we need God to answer just right then owe their efficiency and their effectiveness to the long hours that we spend in prayer in a relational building way.
Yeah, that's huge. So I guess I want to close by asking this question. What would you say to someone who's recognized, I want to pray more? All of us need to pray more. I'll just say all of us need to pray more, no matter how long you're praying. Unless someone's praying literally 24 hours a day, in which case, eat some food. But if someone's saying like, I want to pray more, I want to build a prayer life again, I want to talk to God in that way again, what is something that you would encourage them with, or a first step that they can take, especially if they're kind of uncomfortable with it? Maybe that's the reason they stepped away in the first place. But what is something that you would share with them, Austin?
Just try a bunch of different methods. Not necessarily methods of prayer. There's the ask and the whatever all of those acronyms are.
Yeah.
Which I think they have their place, but prayer isn't about method, it's about relationship. But try different things that you can do, like journaling or prayer walks, just like walking around and talking to God on a trail or something, that are effective for you, that you feel close to God while you're doing it. And don't get discouraged if one thing doesn't work. Just try a variety and see how God reaches you.
Yeah. And yeah, what that comfortable way to interact with God is. Absolutely. Marty, what about you?
Well, one verse that comes to mind is prayer of a righteous man availeth much. And from my experience, most guys, and I deal with guys, that's my ministry right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I find with guys, one of the reasons why guys don't pray is they've got stuff that they haven't dealt with. And I believe that there is really a spiritual block going on. And so when I think of that text, the prayer of a righteous man availeth much, men want to be powerful. They want to be successful in what they do. And when they pray and they feel no power and no success in it, they don't do it. But one of the main reasons why they are, I believe, stymieing that part of the righteous man is that they're not dealing with secret sin, things like that in their life. So I would just challenge any young man or old, is your prayer life a reflection of that?
Yeah.
And because I think that's a really sobering question to ask. I know it's been a factor in my life, and I don't know of any man that's not true.
That's huge. I'm not going to add anything to that. I think that's really significant. And I think everything that you've said, while you've directed it kind of at guys, because that's kind of the world that you're in right now, I definitely see how that applies across the board. And so I would encourage anyone who's thinking about, kind of reactivating their prayer life or reinitiating their prayer life to do it. In the same way that Austin said, it is, this isn't one of, we can sometimes come at prayer thinking the same way we come at church and saying, I'm not good enough to go to church. There are some people that believe that, but that's not the point. The point is that we can pray, and that we should be praying regardless of how we view ourselves, because by aligning ourselves with God's will, we're also aligning ourselves with how God views us. And so I just want to encourage you to continue praying, to get back into it, and find the way that you can express yourself to God. And we just want to thank you so much for listening. Austin and Marty, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives and experiences and journeys as well. I've really grown from this conversation. This has been really cool for me, and I hope it has for you. So, but thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to Echo and for being on this journey with us. If you're watching on YouTube, we hope that you'll leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button. If you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever podcatching app that you like the most, we hope that you'll hit that subscribe button, that you'll leave a review, and that you'll engage with us. And also, for more content from Project Refresh that's like Echo and some of the other shows that we host, then head on over to theprojectrefresh.org. Thank you so much for your support. It means the world to us, and we'll see you next week.